I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to you all to this October meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee. Councillor Philo has kindly agreed to lead us in the karakia, but as we have the words in front of us and on the screen, I suggest that we all follow along and say the karakia as well.
Morena, me inoi tātou. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā tara ki tai, e hia ki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you very much. Right, I'm not aware of any apologies for the meeting today. We have a full muster and I assume there's no apologies for early departure. Agenda item 3, there are no requests for public participation today. Conflicts of interest. I would not be meeting your expectations if I didn't pause on this agenda item and again emphasise the importance of this. Not only are we required to sort of keep the interest of register that exists for each of us up to date, but also consider as to whether there are any agenda items today for which any of us may have a conflict. So I'll just pause momentarily, take silence as being assent. Thank you. Conflicts of interest is very important in the current environment. Also, I'm not aware of any items of the extraordinary business that are not on the agenda. So we go into our sort of first substantial item is the confirmation of the minutes of our last meeting, 15th of June, nearly 4 months ago rather than our normal sort of 3-monthly period. So we have those in our papers. They've been through due process before they come here, but it's an opportunity for the Audit and Risk Committee to look at those minutes and see if any corrections are required. Again, we will take silence as assent. So I'll move that the confirmation of the minutes of the 15th of June be approved. All those in favour, please say aye. We need a seconder, sorry. Councillor Johnson saved my bacon, thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary carried. Right. Agenda item 7.1, the first of our activity reports. A very important agenda item which always gets plenty of discussion. Health and safety. Our quarterly report, this one is up to the end of June, if I'm not mistaken. So, there is a little bit of time since this report was prepared. But we've been asked to note this or receive this report. I'm happy to move in that direction. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Turin. It's been moved and seconded. So who is going to speak to this? Sam, would you like to come to the table? As is the normal process, you know well, Sam, we'll take the report as read, but we really do appreciate you highlighting the matters in the report and perhaps anything that may have happened since this report was completed.
Thank you, Chair, and morena koutou. So I'll take the report as read and I will highlight a few key things from it and then open for questions. So there's 4 key things to highlight. Training attendance throughout the quarter continued to increase, and we saw a lot of engagement by both staff and some of our people leaders who continue to come along to some of these trainings. It was also the first quarter that we've run a dedicated health and safety for people leaders training, which was really useful for our people leaders to help them understand what some of their health and safety obligations are with regards to staff under their care. We're also seeing a lot of people go through our health and safety inductions. Of course, a key part when new staff come into the organisation to understand how we do health and safety here at Porirua City, which also has seen an increase in our bullying, harassment, discrimination attendance, as well as our incident reporting attendance to help people really understand the value of reporting, but also the general basics of bullying, harassment, discrimination as they come into our organisation. The other two key points to note is we also held elections for our health and safety reps during the quarter, which saw 12 new members join up, which means some new faces, some eager beavers to join our health and safety space to help drive some of the cultural and behavioural activities in the business there with some new and improved staff in there. And then the final update was we supported 2 staff through a return to work program, injury related. You'll note in the injury space we had 2 existing staff going through a bit of a long-term injury space that we supported through and are back at work as of the last quarter, being quarter 1 of this financial year. But I think those are some of the key points.
Thank you very much, Sam. Questions, discussion on the health and safety report. Councillor Leggett.
Thanks, Sam. I note there's some more data in there as well. Just looking at it all, can I ask you the question, is there anything in there that might concern you that you might want to advise us about as well? Are there any other issues we should be taking into account?
Through the chair, one of the biggest challenges we have is just trying to get that narration across these different areas. And one area that we're going to look at doing more of is in our contractor space. Of course, we've got our 3 big contractors at the end there. Wellington Water provides a really good narrative against all of their incidents, and we just need to work with the other 2. But equally, we're starting to see more of our non-big contractors come through our reporting, so our smaller ones, where we're trying to encourage our staff who manage these contractors to use our reporting system to come through that way. So that would probably be not an area of concern, but an area where we can improve on in that space.
Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Look, I note the new pain and discomfort in the records here. We've got injury-related, threatening behaviour, near misses, pain and discomfort. That's a new one that's been added. So is this as a result of incidents, or I noted one of the people there had been doing a lot of reversing in his truck and had a sore neck as a result. Is that the sort of thing we're recording, is it?
Yes, that's correct. Pain and discomfort usually focuses on those incidents where you might not have an injury, but you have some sort of pain, and that's where in the 2 quarters ago, that's where the breathing issues came through. It wasn't exactly an injury, but rather they were feeling pain and discomfort from a respiratory issue.
Sam, that's a good segue into my question, an update on the air quality in the pool. We saw that at our last meeting. I was super impressed with the response of the council to that issue, the thoroughness of it. Just give us an up-to-minute update on that. Is the issue resolved in the swim club? Are they happy with where things are at?
Through you, Chair. So since we last brought this to the Audit and Risk, we have met with the club a few times already. One was as a follow-up after coming to Audit and Risk to talk through some of the next steps that we had to take, and then of course a subsequent one after that to discuss with them about what those steps looked like. So in the report I highlighted some of the key initiatives that were undertaken over at the arena. One was introducing visible indicators that the airflow was actually working. So if you are at the arena and you see these flags up by the vents, those are to help to see whether the air is actually flowing up there, which was one of the concerns that it wasn't. So we've got that. The other one was the team have increased the airflow at the facility almost twofold. it's more than the national requirements, but that was just more because we could, and we had that ability to do so as part of the shutdown of the arena that happened a few months ago. So a lot of work happened during that time. We've also agreed with the club that they would come on a bit of a tour of the facility for themselves to see face to face what changes have been made, given for a lot of them this was quite important, and for many it was their children who were coming through these incident reports. And I guess the other one was we have agreed to catch up again later on this year just to assess over the last 4 months what incidents have occurred and is there anything else that we should be doing. I am thankful to note that the incidents in the breathing space has reduced dramatically since the shutdown, since all of the improvements have been made. And at the moment we're not really seeing a lot of breathing incidents happen over there.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam. Felicity.
Thanks, Sam. A really good report again, and it tells a lot. The one thing I was wondering about was Section 5 around managing health-related risks refers to workstation assessments, and I just wondered what other health-related risks you had identified or were aware of that perhaps haven't emerged in this report.
Through the chair, so generally we have more information about health-related risks at the end of the year. So in a few weeks we have our annual health checks for our staff, which is where they'll go through and do the finger test for those staff who use heavy vibrating equipment to make sure that there's no long-term health impacts there, as well as sun exposure and all of those sorts of things. We're only just starting that journey to assess what they do in those annual checks, and then that complete feedback loop about, okay, we've got some of these staff who are going through certain health issues, whether it's age or general exposure to some of these risks, and then it's the now what from our end. So we know these risks, so what are we going to do about it, or what can we do about it with these staff? But generally this is still a new thing that we've only just started reporting on the last financial year, and like with all the other areas, we'll look to increase the detail in there over time.
Thank you.
Councillor Turin.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to reflect on that process around Te Rauparaha Arena and the air quality, and just thank you again I think that's been handled spectacularly well. Really glad we used that opportunity of the close down too. So yeah, just to reflect on that, that's been really, really good. And around the inclusion of customer data in this as well, obviously it's probably still a little bit too early for us to see any trends, but I think it's really good that's in there. I just wanted to reflect as well, as a former lifeguard at Te Rauparaha Arena, 33 incidents of a graze or scrape. Hopefully that sheds some light on why lifeguards are so grumpy about not running around the pool, so people understand that now. But cool, but this is really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for those comments. I think they're sort of echoed around the table. It's very good work. Any further discussion on the health and safety report? Thank you, Sam. As has been said a couple of times in the discussion, excellent reporting. It always takes my breath away when I see the big numbers, and then I think, oh no, that's right, the customers are in there now. I still haven't quite got used to that, but I think this is the second or perhaps third time, and we will get used to those sort of bigger numbers now that we've got a bigger population being measured. So thank you, Sam. All right, so it's been moved and seconded that we receive this report. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you for that. Agenda item 7.2 is the first of 3 or 4 agenda items. Phyllis, would you like to sort of come up to the table? So the first of this piece of work is the quarterly update for risk and insurance. We have been asked to receive the report and also agree to the addition of an internal audit review on this year's plan on the Wakakatahi Transport Agency Funding Assistance Claims Process, and also the Roading Assistance and Maintenance Management System. So I will move in that regard, seconded by Councillor Duncan. Thank you. Felicity, thank you for your work on this and lead us through before we open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Chair. We'll take the report as read, but just a few matters to highlight in terms of this report. Overall, the risk and audit program is on track, and we've completed the Q1 audit. And in terms of requesting the new review, this is looking at a specific aspect of how we manage our funding claims to Waka Kotahi. So it's a very narrow aspect, and this have gone through due process of being approved by the audit by the ELT, and we ask that the Audit and Risk Committee endorse and approve this as well. This will have no impact on our program of work, so we will still deliver that within our current resources. In terms of the internal audit finding, there are no matters of concern to raise to this committee. There are no open high-risk items, and everything else is progressing on track. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phyllis. Open for discussion. Phyllis, thank you for covering off. I think this is indication of good planning, that when the year's activities are planned out, there is a little bit of room to take additional work on. And thank you, Phyllis, for answering my question of sort of saying, yes, we do have capacity to take this Waka Kotahi work on and still complete the work program for the year. I think that this exercise is incredibly well timed. I understand there's a Waka Kotahi audit coming up, a standard audit in December. So this piece of work will be most helpful in giving a heads up before those external people come in and look at the claims process. So well-timed, excellent sort of piece of preventative work, if you like. So, any further discussion on the risk and assurance update? Thank you, Phyllis. It's been moved and seconded. Councillor Leggett, you look sorry.
Oh, sorry. This recognises under discussion the 3 internal audit reviews. So, but they come as like the internal audit report on project management as item 7.3. So, what are we actually approving here, or what can we ask questions about? I'm confused.
We'll deal with project management and sensitive expenditure, the work separately. They're separate agenda items. So,
well, no, I can see they're separate agenda items, but it's in the discussion on 7.2. Yeah.
So what we're dealing with here is an update to the plan, and also approving the go-ahead of this additional work on the claims process. So, yeah, apologies for not making that clear. Everybody happy? So it's been moved and seconded that we receive the update, that we approve the additional work on the Waka Kotahi claims process. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you, Phyllis. Now we'll move on to the work that you've done over the last quarter. The first one, agenda item 7.3, the work on project management. We've been asked to receive this report, so I'm happy to move in that regard. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mayor. It's been moved and seconded. Phyllis, again, we'll ask you to introduce us to this report and we'll open it for discussion.
Kira, thank you, Chair. So this report is the last of last year's audit work program, and the overall result is partially effective. So there are some areas that management can do to improve basically the project management framework. And I'm happy to report that we have taken some steps around that area. 2 of the 3 recommendations have been addressed, and and I believe that those actions will continue to be monitored to just make sure that they continue to be effective in terms of having a robust framework that our staff can use.
Thank you, Phyllis. An important piece of work. Project management is at the heart of a lot of what council does. So, to have a risk and assurance pair of eyes look at the process, come up with some recommendations, in my opinion, is a really worthwhile effort. So, Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I was a little bit disconcerted when I read this, given that project management is such a core part of our business, and I thought that we'd been assured, it was a number of years ago now, that we were lifting our game in project management. And as a result of this audit, it doesn't seem that we had been entirely effective. And I just wondered how much leakage in terms of overall efficiency, in terms of cost to the organisation, that this, may have caused before we get on top of it, because it is absolutely crucial to the organisation. I mean, there's project management everywhere, and I'm not talking about the big, huge projects, just other smaller stuff, as this alludes to. So maybe that's a question or a comment. Wendy, as Chief Executive, can you assure us that we are on top of this and the things that have been put in place will ensure that our project management processes will improve?
Yes. It's like most things. You think you've sorted it out, and then you turn your attention to other things, and people change, and you get some slippage. So yeah, it was a surprise to me, to be honest. To be fair, I don't know that it's certainly potentially cost, but I think it's more effectiveness and you'd like to be assured that things are going as well as they possibly can. And also we do focus on the bigger projects. So if there's some expertise in-house, we will focus it on the higher risk projects. It's not to say that almost everything you can categorise as a project, but we're certainly doing turned our attention to professionalising some of our project managers. So we've got some Prince 2 training in place, which people are very enthusiastic about, because actually it's a non-qualification. People understand what it is. So we're putting quite a lot of effort into that, and that's proving to be very effective. But yeah, certainly we are focusing on the issues that have been raised here.
Through you, Chair, if I could just add to that. We also run a procurement committee, which so anything that sort of goes to the market or wants to go direct to a supplier comes through a procurement committee. So there's a fair bit of control on that to ensure we're as fiscally controlled as we can. And I'd also just remind councillors that, of course, the big projects which we report to you are all extensively managed through the process, and all the gateways are operated through that, so you can see how that's going. So hopefully that gives you some reassurance.
Felicity.
I agree with all the comments so far. I was also interested in the feedback around the guidance and templates and everything being sort of overwhelming and daunting for smaller projects. And I just wondered, is that something that you can fix, and will you get feedback about all this sort of not in the too distant future to sort of get that feedback that you're on track with the changes?
Through you, Chair. Yes, this is something that we would continue to monitor. We do know that ELT has approved an updated classification just to make it easier, especially for smaller projects, that they are not overwhelmed, with the process, and that's when they stop following the process. I am working with the PMO to make sure that they are. I know that they are having some briefing about it and some training with the project managers, and I'll be going along with some of them, and we're happy to report back as part of the usual reporting around follow-up on audit recommendations.
Felicity, Thank you for that. Phyllis, can I ask, I think sort of with the interest shown by the Audit and Risk Committee here on this and the acknowledgement of the importance of project management to really all of Council's activity, can you monitor, can you keep an eye on the implementation of these recommendations and perhaps at our next meeting, but that might be a little bit early, or our meeting in early next year, just in your update, if you could comment on how the implementation of these recommendations are tracking. So I think that would be helpful and informative to us.
I think I can do that at the next meeting.
Yep. Councillor Waddle.
Yeah, just following on from Councillor Leggett's questions around surprise, I think, from this. When was our project management last audited or checked?
It was before my time, so I believe before 2019, so just before they implemented the new project management policy and tool. I think that was a result of the audit, I believe. But yeah.
Okay, and just follow on from that, do we plan to review it again in a similar cycle, 3 to 4 years down the track?
It would depend on this committee in terms of what the committee would like me to look at. It can be part of the program of work if approved by this committee.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I would certainly recommend. It's such an important area and one where the thinking changes a bit. And I think that's what the chief executive was saying. That you look at it at one point in time, and then the general wisdom as to how you undertake this activity moves. So I would think every 2 years is worthwhile just doing an update on it. So. Perhaps in the 24-25 cycle for this. So. All right. Any further discussion? Thank you for that. As I indicated, a really worthwhile piece of work. So we've been asked to receive the report. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. Agenda item 7.4. Another valuable piece of work on the Verification Agency Quality Management System compliance audit. And again, we've been asked to receive this report, and I'm happy to move in that direction. The seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Waddle. It's been moved and seconded. So we will ask Phyllis again to address this piece of work for us before opening it up for discussion.
Right. Kia ora. So overall, the audit concludes that the controls in this area is effective. So that's great. And a lot of recommendations are about improving the efficiency and the overall streamlining of the process, as opposed to any specific issues around the effectiveness of how well we're doing this work. So, and this is an area that Risk and Assurance have been looking at every year. And with some of these recommendations, I believe that this is something that we can actually reduce in the future because we believe that the controls in this area are pretty good.
Thank you, Phyllis. Again, another really important area, impacts the public. It's very, very public-facing, this. It's excellent to hear that the controls are good, but keep a close eye on it. It's an area that can sort of move very quickly with disastrous consequences. All right. Any further discussion? So we've been asked to receive this report. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Right, agenda item 7.5, the internal audit work on sensitive expenditure. We've been asked to receive this report. I will move in that direction. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Leggett. Thank you, Phyllis, again for this work. Again, a really important area. And thank you for your efforts in that regard. So please highlight this report to us.
Kia ora, Chair. So the sensitive expenditure audit is something that we do every year, and I believe there's value for us to continue doing this every year. There are still a number of issues that we've raised in terms of documentation, so here in the report. But however, my view is that overall there are no issues around probity or any inappropriate expenditure as such. I will be working with management around looking at how we can monitor this area possibly more frequently, just to improve our training and expectations, especially as there are possibly new managers around as well, etc. So overall, this area is effective, but yes, we do have some actions planned with management to ensure that we continue to be on top of this space.
Thank you, Phyllis. Councillor Trelin.
Cheers, thank you. Yeah, just on that, so noting management actions required to ensure that staff provide good explanations for all expenses. Good to see that things are trending in the right direction. Could you just speak to the types of things that we can expect to see in terms of what that management action will involve?
Thanks, Phyllis.
Yeah. There will be, I am proposing with management, and I think they have agreed for us to look at some of the quarterly expenses, especially around the ELT area and possibly in the CE office area, because that's one area that is not systemized, it's not system automated. So there's usually required for a physical sign-off, going through Vendy, going to different chairs, etc. And that's where the process could sometimes fall apart when it is manual. So they will be looking at that possibly quarterly, just so that we are on top of it in the first instance, because we do know that we have missed one or two, sign off, or they're not done timely in line with process. So that's one of the things that we are expecting to do. We are also trying to look at whether we could make it simpler into our intranet page around some of the coding, where managers are still getting a bit confused around the different types of expenses on how to code them. Like, is catering food, or is it for meetings? So things like that, which are important, but can sometimes be confusing for managers. So we are trying to see how we could simplify and put that information up, because the policy is, it can be daunting for some managers who are busy. Yeah.
Councillor Leggett, and then Roy has indicated he'd like. Yeah, okay.
Through you, Chair, look, I just, one of the actions I've decided we'll take is, if you have a look at the table on page 4, purchase cards are obviously the area where there's most little nuances need to be addressed. So we'll call all the purchase card holders together and get Phyllis to take them through and let them know what their expectations are. So at least we'll try and address that, because I think it's important. They do forget every now and again, particularly when those are out in the field. It gets a bit harder for them to often, write on the back of things what they're getting for. But we'll call them together, and that, I think, will be a good step to remind them what their obligations are.
Thank you, Roy. Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask Sam, I think a couple of these, there were some issues raised in your report around, am I correct, because I haven't found it, I just remember reading it, about credit card, use of credit cards for purchases, and there were 3, I think, that you were looking at. Is this related to this? I mean, it's in the past, but, you can see, is this...
Sam.
Thanks for the question. Our report does highlight that on behalf of the Auditor General, we look at this expenditure annually. Our focus is really on a couple of things: the appropriateness of Council's policies and how they're applied. So we have a handful of, I call it, compliance type matters related to one-up approval or inconsistency with policies that will formalise in our report to management, but thematically similar issues to what Phyllis's report highlights.
So the things in here would address your concerns, or the things that you're raising, the things that Phyllis has been talking about here now?
I think so. Where you're dealing with humans, so I think
I
our
appreciate
experience across this type of thing is often it's the diligence to apply the policies or an understanding of the policies. So management steps on awareness and enforcing from the centre the discipline on people are kind of the most practical steps you can take, but you're left with how well people respond.
Councillor Johnson.
Just very quickly, the purpose of this is really more about managing the paper trail correctly rather than inappropriate spending. Is that correct?
No,
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Can I just ask Councillor Leggett, thank you for asking Sam, because Phyllis, as she has indicated to us, looks at this area every year, which I applaud. I think it's an area that often trips up councils, and Sam has indicated that he has some responsibilities to look at it. So we are getting sets of eyes across this, which is good. But, is there some coordination? Phyllis, in your work, and Sam, in your work, do you rely on Phyllis's? Do you sort of compare notes? Do you talk? Because, I think the whole process of multiple eyes looking at this would benefit from a little bit of integration and talking to one another. So I suppose my question is, is that happening?
Yeah, so we coordinate with Phyllis, understand her findings and review her reports. We're still required to do our own work, but we have the opportunity to be thoughtful. We don't look at everything, so we're targeted, and we can take credit for understanding where internal audit have sort of looked and what they've found in any given year.
All right. I think council can be well pleased with the processes and internal audit and external audit looking at this area. So thank you for the agenda item, both Phyllis and Sam. Thank you for your response to it. So we've been asked to receive this report. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you for that. Agenda item 7.6. Thank you, Phyllis. A long-term plan update. And again, we've been asked to receive this report, so I'm happy to move in that regard. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Roy, are you going to speak to this paper, give us a little bit of an update as to how things are tracking with the LTP?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. So we are continuing to make progress towards development of a long-term plan. We have had many sessions with workshops with councillors, but it is a very challenging LTP, not only because of, I guess, the water reform issue, but also just with the size of our capital program, which I've highlighted in here. I can advise that we are not the only council that is struggling through this process. I was at a Wellington Water client meeting yesterday, and both Wellington City and Hutt City raised concerns from their perspective in terms of challenges with the LTPs, particularly around looking at very high rate increases and challenges around debt ceilings caused by the capital program. So we are not alone. And I think that's probably the best thing I could say. I guess we're waiting to see the result on the weekend for many reasons, but that will provide hopefully some clarity in terms of how we advance our capital program, particularly the three waters.
Open for discussion, Councillor Trellin.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just wondering, Roy, if you could speak a little bit more to particularly that issue around the debt ceiling, and that we'll be approaching it, particularly with the number of big projects that we want to be delivering on. Could you just talk us through what the implications are of getting closer to that debt ceiling, and any things that should be front of mind or concerns for us, I guess, if we do get quite close to that level?
Sure. Through your chair, I guess we have the debt ceiling is actually a function between our debt and also our revenue, and we can go up to 280% of our revenue. That's the LGFA sort of covenant. We would not want to breach that. That would be a default in terms of some of our agreements with LGFA. So if we were getting close to that, we would sort of want to go and talk to them about that. I did have a chat yesterday with PwC, who are our Treasury advisors on that, and we have a Treasury meeting on Monday, so we'll spend a little more time on that. The challenge for us is really determining what the capital program will be and when that will come to pass. So if you looked at this year's annual plan, we had a capital program that was 180 odd million, but we only funded in 70% of that. So, but eventually the 30% will come to pass and we'll need to cover that off. So you have this sort of lag through carry forwards that actually cause some quite challenging to actually determine when or if you were to breach that ceiling without taking some appropriate action. There is a perverse calculation in how that ceiling is calculated, obviously, in terms of revenue. So if you put your rates up significantly, you generate far more headroom. So it's a little bit of a perverse situation, but that's what actually happens and how it works. So we are working through that at the moment. Theoretically, in the next couple of years, after 2 years, we could be quite tight with that if all the capital program that was put forward is delivered within that time frame. So we are looking at, as you're aware at the moment, of how we could smooth the first couple of years of that to ensure that we don't get near that management level of 280%. But it is a sort of very challenging item.
Thanks. And just following up to that, and on the question about the the ceiling going up as rates go up, when we talk about capital projects, often we're given an estimate of this is going to be the rating impact on that. When we talk about that rating impact, does that usually factor in an increase to that ceiling as well, or is that a separate thing again?
Through you, Chair. Look, until we actually settle on a capital program, we can't give you a definite number in terms of the rates because whatever the rate number is generates that headroom. What I can say, and where it gets a little bit complicated, is that with our big capital projects, under the accounting rules, we can capitalise our interest costs, and depreciation will not start until the project is actually complete. So, as you're aware, we have some quite big projects this year and next year in terms of the three waters. So the immediate impact of those projects will actually probably start to occur in year 2 or 3 of the LTP. So you create a little bit of a bow wave. So in our workshops, we've talked about, I think it's $10 million represents a 1% rate increase. And that is true. What I can't tell you is the timing of that particular 1%. So we are starting off at as you recall, a 200 million program for the first year of their long-term plan, which would be about 11% rate impact, but that could be spread over from when it falls. We are now down, I think, at 160 million. Following the workshops, we're looking at that, and we're looking to sort of see if we can smooth that out even more. So I can't actually answer that because it's the complexities, but it is important we settle on a program to determine what it's likely to be those rate impacts are, so then you could see and maybe make some further adjustments when you can see the timing of that.
Thank you, Roy. Can I sort of indicate through a couple of other hats that I wear that I know there's going to be a lot of focus this year, particularly from the Office of the Auditor General, on climate change. I think sort of coming out of the weather issues that Auckland and the East Coast have had since the last annual plan, the impact that's had on local bodies in those areas, that there is an expectation that there will be a real step change in dealing with climate change in this year's LTP. So just an area to sort of focus on, an area to include perhaps in the consultation process. Second point, Roy, I think we probably won't have a lot of clarity from Saturday's election as to sort of what the policy is. And or what any new policy in relation to Three Waters reform is going to be. So you're probably going to get right up to the time of locking and loading your policies for consultation without a real clarity on the sort of the impact of those reforms. So, if coalition discussions take many months and there's no sort of clarity as to sort of the view on this reform, you're going to have to take a position on LTP and sort of go out to consultation with, and then deal with anything in their sort of annual plans.
Yeah, I accept that. I think I would hope if that was the situation, it was we didn't have some clarity, that we'd get some guidance from OAG in terms of an approach, because I think it's important that all councils adopt a similar approach in how they put it forward.
Totally agree, Roy. I think the guidance might come from DIA rather than the OAG. The OAG is always a bit sort of frightened to give guidance in these sorts of areas.
I would point out there needs to be a legislation change to enable us to budget longer than, I think it's 2 years from memory. So there's actually quite an impediment to clarity on this. So, you know, there's a lot of talk about repealing water reform, if indeed it's a national-led coalition. You're right, coalition talks might drag us past the sensible point of kind of budget reality. So most of the councils, including us, are taking quite a precautionary sort of measure around that, because almost certainly we had a lovely letter from the Department of Internal Affairs telling us that 1 October next year is when water reform would come to pass. I think we can say that is not true. It's very unlikely to happen. So delay is almost inevitable, and it will push us right, I think, beyond that time frame that's in the legislation. So yes, it's about the worst long-term planning moment I've seen in my life, and I've seen far too many long-term plans, actually.
Totally agree, Wendy. I think it's a really difficult exercise every 3 years that councils need to do. It's been handled by this council very professionally and well in the past, but the current climate, as the Chief Executive has said, is something that's never been seen before. And, there's so much uncertainty, and to be doing a long-term plan in that sort of environment is really difficult. So stay connected, stay talkings, and, at the end of the day, all will be revealed one way or the other. So, Councillor Turin.
Thank you. Yeah, probably a follow-up for Wendy, I think, actually, just in terms of if we're looking at that delay around some key decision making. Obviously, we still have to do a lot of work now for getting ready for passing the LTP. Does that mean we almost need to develop two options in parallel of this is going to be the LTP with water and this is going to be the LTP without? And do we have the capacity to do that? Is that even possible?
At the moment, we're kind of planning around a 5-year time frame. And of course, our infrastructure strategy still spans 30 years. So, it's a bit of an uneasy moment for us. But, we're kind of, planning that water will be with us, and hoping that there'll be an elegant way of dropping things off if things go more quickly than we might have expected. None of that's, of course, very elegant, but we're doing our best to kind of cover all bases on that, but there's no real clarity. Everybody's right, we'll have a direction of travel after Saturday. Still some uncertainty on if there's a change of government, quite what that policy would end up being. governments have a habit when they come in of finding out a whole lot of new things that they then think, oh, maybe we'll tweak this policy a bit. So there's a bit of thinking to go in, and it won't be in a very timely way. As my greatest fear is that we're really past the return date already, really, on some of those things. So we're doing our best. It feels like a bit of a wrestling things to the ground, but yeah, we just box on.
Thank you, Wendy. Great comment and good discussion. I think really to sort of wrap it up, all we can do is wish everybody that's involved in the process very good luck. And understand there's plenty of people within council that are there with your back, if you like, happy to give you support. Certainly this committee is in that space. We give you support and we look forward to an update certainly at the December meeting. But if we can play any other role along the process, do not hesitate to call us together for a sort of one agenda item meeting if that would be helpful. All right, excellent discussion, good awareness of a very, very difficult exercise, but we will get there. All right, so we've been asked to receive that update. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you for that. Right, agenda item 7.7. Thank you, Graham. Another one of our standard compliance reports. Again, a very important update, our Treasury Investment and Liability Management quarterly report. We've been asked to receive this report, and I'm happy to move in that regard. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mayor. It's been moved and seconded. Thank you, Graham, for your efforts in this regard and the assistance of PwC. Please just step us through this update report to the end of September, this one. So,
thank you, Chair. No, this is at the end of June.
Okay, sorry.
Yep, that's all right. So this is the...
had a September date on it. So.
Oh, yes, yep. That's when the report was produced.
Yep.
But the report is as at the end of June.
End of June. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. So thank you, Chair. The report is the compliance report, and it shows that we have fully complied with the Treasury policy as at the end of June. And I've detailed on item 7 in the report about the transaction log for the quarter. There was not much action within that quarter to the end of June. The only note is that the average cost of funds, which is shown on that page, I think it's 68, is now at 4.91, which is getting close to the budget number which we used for the annual plan, which was just over the 5%. So the cost of debt is getting up there. I have no anything else to say unless there's any questions on anything in particular.
Thank you, Graham. Open for discussion. As Graham drew to our attention, it's quite a different average cost of funds than what we saw for many years. If you just go back only 12 or 18 months, I think it was around about 2% or 3%. But this figure at 4.91, while as Graham points out, it's close to budget and it's much higher than what we've experienced over perhaps the last 10 years. It is effectively managed with interest rate tools to sort of keep that down. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the annual report. But council, together with their advisors, do all they can to sort of manage that average cost of funds as low as possible. So. All right, So no further discussion. Always important that we get that sign-off to the compliance. So we've been asked to receive this report. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Right, the substantive part of today's agenda, 7.8, for the Audit Risk Committee to consider the annual report draft. We've been, there's quite a number of recommendations on page 70 there. We've been asked to receive the report, note the comments of the external auditors, agree the appropriate information and approach, agree the accounting treatments, note the overview of the financial and non-financial results, and endorse the adoption of the annual report and the summary report at the 26th of October council meeting. So there's quite a bit for us to consider here. So I will move all those recommendations to get this document on the table. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Waddle. Can I start off by first thanking the team? You know, this is an incredible effort and not one that's commonly replicated around the country, I can tell you. To be sort of sitting here on the 12th of October with a pretty near final annual report and with the auditors who will report in the next agenda item pretty much finished. This is an incredible effort in a climate that is complicated, and I know many councils are struggling to achieve the 31st of October deadline. So Porirua City can be well pleased with the team and the effort done to get us to this stage. So with that wind blowing in your sails, can I hand over to you, Peter, and thank you for the paper and introduce us to the great work that you and the team have done.
Thank you, Chair. So probably just a couple of highlights that I want to draw your attention to. Firstly, there's been a change of accounting standard this year. So it was mandatory to adopt PBE IPSAS 41. So it's Public Benefit Entity International Public Sector Accounting Standard 41. So there's a few acronyms in this paper. So this is a change to how we measure and classify some of our financial instruments. So there's a table in that paper that shows there's been a change to how we classify some of them. And probably the biggest impact is around our sundry debtors. So there was a change to how we calculate our provision for doubtful debts. So it's now referred to as an expected credit loss model. So previously the historical loss model, you waited till there was a trigger event to record a doubtful debt provision. Generally for council, that was if our debts got to 90 days overdue. So in the new expected credit loss model, it more looks at our bad debts in the relation to sales and the collectability. So it's had an impact of 844,000 reduction in our doubtful debt provision or expected credit loss, and that's gone through retained earnings this year. Probably the only other thing to highlight is probably the biggest impact on our financial statements is our reduction in subsidies and grants compared to the annual plan. So that's 13 million down, which is quite a big impact. So that's partly Waka Kotahi and partly due to Eastern Porirua. And I think Roy would like to give some extra comments around that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to comment on the Eastern Porirua number because it's a little bit unusual to say, well, how does that impact us? So when the last LTP plan was put together, some assumptions were made about how the project in Eastern Porirua would roll out, and you may recall that we had identified the cost for the three waters in that space was around 420 million, and of which we expected Kāinga Ora to fund 270 million of that. So how the accounts were put together, or the long-term plan, was assumed that the gross expenditure of 420 was spread throughout in terms of our capital expenditure, and we showed the 270 coming in effectively as a grant, money from them. So at the time, that was the appropriate treatment. It went through the audit process and we deemed it was reasonable because we were still uncertain. As it's transpired, that hasn't been how the accounting treatment is handled. They are spending the money. So what we've seen is, while we had budgeted to have some grant money from Kāinga Ora, that hasn't received it, which is where the contribution is. Now, for this year in particular, it's not a large amount, but it did flow through into the old LTP for the next few years. So there will be a change of that when we put the new LTP together. So hopefully that explains it.
So just to confirm, Roy, that's a permanent change?
Correct, yes.
It's not a timing?
No, it's just the treatment, the assumption we made, how we accounted for it is different. So just gross terms, we expect the net amount that Porirua City would pay over the next 30 years was the 150 million, and we could have treated that as the net, but we treated it effectively as gross, and that's proved not to be how the project's rolled out, and how, in fact, it's proved to be the funding from Kāinga Ora has been somewhat different.
Thank you, Roy. Anything further on this, Peter? So we're open for discussion. Right, Councillor Trelin.
Cheers, thank you. Just a question on the Statement of Comprehensive Revenue and Expense. The biggest thing jumped out for me, obviously, the difference in revaluation levels for the actual versus what was in the annual plan. And it's different by almost an order of magnitude. So I wonder if you could just speak to why exactly that is and what any potential implications of that are.
Through you, Chair, if I can answer that. So we normally do undertake revaluations, and we have a timing for them. This year we did an additional revaluation of the three waters in light of what was coming up for the reforms. So the number was a little bit larger as a result of taking on an additional revaluation, but it does show the significant cost pressures that have occurred in the last few years. So that 327 million will flow through into our accounts for this year, etc. So you will see a higher depreciation charge. The good thing about that 327 is a significant amount of that is in land, which we don't depreciate. So, and we're just working through the implications of that at the moment. So that's, but it is larger than we would normally expect and what we budget for. I think we use Burl as the indices going forward, and Burl have traditionally been quite conservative in terms of that. But as you'll be aware, the last 2 or 3 years we've seen significant increases in costs, and that of course has flowed through in terms of valuations, particularly in the three waters.
And
does that answer the question?
Yeah, it largely does. And I guess just to clarify, does that mean that this sort of reflects just general market trends and what's happening with the value of land as opposed to the predictions being catastrophically wrong?
Correct. I think you're seeing that in the revaluations that came through in terms of the residential properties, etc., where I think the increase has been around 70% of land value in the last revaluation, which is far more than the improvement value. So that's flowed through, and we're seeing it here.
Okay, thank you.
And Roy, did I understand it right? There was also some reclassification. I don't think that's quite the right term, but in the last general valuation of land in the area, some of those were reclassified and gave rise to higher values.
In terms of this particular report, or the residential one, I hear.
No,
I'm going to pass back to my colleague here because I'm not quite sure if that was the case from but it may well be. But land, if you can see, there's a combination of land under roads plus land itself. Yeah.
I'm particularly referring to the 113%, the land. That was a huge increase.
Correct. I think during the process, Chair, there was some. We did have some challenges with the valuer in terms of how they interpreted stuff, and I think on one particular property, I think it was the Te Rapara Park out there, they had valued it not as a reserve, so it was actually higher, and we then reduced it down from memory when they became aware of it. So some challenges in the process, which is, I'm sure Sam will talk about when his paper comes up.
Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, a follow on from that valuations one. How confident are we in the performance of Aon in their valuations? Because I note later on in Sam's paper there that he's found a number of errors that they've made in their valuations, and I wonder whether we can be really confident in them.
Through you, Chair. We are meeting with Aon to discuss their effort this year. And I guess I can say we were very disappointed in terms of the number of errors that came through and the time it's taken. So we are going to review our use of them going forward. I think at the end of the day, though, the pricing that they use to do the basis is probably pretty standard around the place. So I'll just leave it at that, I think.
Sam, Nicole, there's lots of Sams in the room, but Sam, Nicole, do you want to cover it at this point, seeing it's been raised, or will you deal with that when we get to your agenda item?
Let's deal with it when we get to the agenda item, Warren. We'll have the paper in front of us and we can talk to specific points.
Okay, fine. All right, Felicity.
So this was my first time going through Porirua City Council's annual report, so it took me a wee while to get my head around it, including the full report and the summary report. So probably my comments are more about some clarification that I think might be useful to readers. So when I went to the summary report, let's just get the pages to be helpful here. The financial summary information I thought was really helpful, and that's not in the full report. So I know you've got abbreviated information in the summary report, but there were some aspects that I think need a little bit of clarification as well. So on page 205, we've got the financial highlights. There's reference to the operating surplus, which is one of those key pieces of information that you're interested in when you look at financial statements, particularly because there's such a variation. But when you go to the summary financial statements on page 209, that operating surplus isn't in there. So I just thought it would be helpful when you're referring to, particular numbers that they're reflected in the statements as well. It's a comment.
Thanks, Felicity. Peter and Roy, just looking at that, perhaps a subtotal. If you go to 209, a subtotal after the net finance costs will give you that figure.
Yeah, it's in the full annual report, financial statements. But that was sort of like, I've spent quite a bit of time on the financial highlights because I think that's where people will. I mean, the other thing relates to the discussion around the land revaluation. There's no sort of commentary anywhere to tell a reader what that's about. So I thought that could be something that could be included as well. So I'm coming from a reader perspective of how do you make sense of this? What am I looking for? And I've got lots of comments, but I don't want to take all the time. I've got some questions around some of the performance measures, but I don't know if you'd like me to bring those up now or, okay. So I've got three questions around the performance measures. One was the reference. Sorry. Okay. The council report says that 37 out of 78 were achieved, but EY has said 38. That might just be a wee error that can be fixed.
A timing difference on our part. So the draft we had when we completed our report on 3 October, there was a subsequent change.
So it is
to
37?
the annual report. 37 is the right answer.
Cool. That's the main thing because that's what the council said. So if that's correct, that's correct. So I had a question, just this is for clarification for me, about the reference to flooding. So on page 130, there's... just allow you to get there. So this is in the commentary under the repair work completed. The last bullet point refers to flooding on Belmont Road. And then the performance measures on page 162, the number of flooding events that occurred in Porirua was 0. Now, I'm not sure if I'm connecting the right dots here. So a clarification question, really.
Through the chair, I'll just ask Todd Livingston from Wellington Water to answer that question.
Thank you, Samuel. Welcome, Todd.
Kia ora. Through the chair, that just comes down to the definition of a flooding event in the DIA measures, which is very strict, and it defines it as water entering a habitable floor of a building.
Okay.
So,
Right. Okay, that answers that one. So the next one was around page 154. Says, so this is about the pools, and it relates to the discussion before about the work that was done with the breathing difficulties and all that. And it says that there were no number of notifiable safety incidences at Te Rapaha pools, etc., and it says 0. And when I saw that, I thought, oh, but we've been hearing a lot about this complaint, and I thought perhaps it's a complaint and it's not a notifiable event. And if it's because of that terminology, I can see why, but I thought perhaps an explanation, because if you're in that swim squad and looking at this, there's no recognition of that.
Through the chair, notifiable is something that you must inform WorkSafe about. So someone cuts off an arm, someone's sent to hospital, various incidents. So there's a threshold there that...
So I thought that might be the case. So therefore my suggestion would be perhaps a footnote to mention what happened in the pool, because we've spent a lot of time on that. There are interested stakeholders and it's not reflected anywhere else. So it's a suggestion, that's all, because it felt like a gap to me.
Thank you, Felicity. I think that's a really good observation. You know, as we've said, both at the previous meeting and again today, you know, the response by council to this air quality event was extremely commendable, and you know, I think it's a good news story, and maybe it's an opportunity missed in this particular section of the statement of service performance to just have a brief statement that there was an issue and this is what was done about it, and this is where the resolution. But you know, I think taking Felicity's reader's lens, I would imagine the swim club are going to be particularly interested in this part of the report. So, you know, not to have any mention of that issue and how it's been dealt with might raise some concerns. And I think it's a really good news story that the council can tell.
Yeah. And just a final one, picking up on the climate change discussion before, the performance measure in here you know, is about achieving having...
Page number, Felicity?
Page 183. So that was about the council signing off on the plan. My question is more like going forward, and this may be picked up in the district plan, there would be different performance measures for climate change, which would pick up on that target of 30% and measure performance. Is my expectation correct?
Through the chair, I don't have an answer to that right now, but I can come back to you with more information on that.
We will be looking at the whole suite of performance measures for the long-term plan. So, like you, I would expect that we will have some different ones going forward. So, yeah.
It just felt quite thin in that space, but I can see that you've got the plan now, and I thought, well, that will then flow through to a suite. So, yeah.
I think if I could just add, the measures that we talk about actually are the ones that were set in 2021, and we have to report against those things. So we're sort of stuck with what we agree with at the beginning of an LTP cycle. So I think your point around the measures for climate control will certainly be in our LTP, because we are investing in that space. And I'm not sure if I recall in this report, but we are doing internally in terms of the boilers, etc., and converting those projects. So we might look at adding something into the report in here for that.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's just about having that context about how the performance is tracking, even if it's not strictly under a measure, but giving that extra story. I'll stop now. Let somebody else have some airtime. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicity. Councillor Leggett.
Sorry, just talking in our summary report about performance measures again. Well, hold on, let me get to it. So page 203. So when we're talking about our summary of performance measures, what I was particularly concerned about, and can you refresh my memory about, if you look at drinking water, we only achieved 2 out of 9. Now, that set off some red flags for me. What were those as far as I'm concerned, our drinking water is perfectly fine, and we're here telling our residents that we only met 2 out of 9 measures. What were those measures?
Todd, are you able to elaborate on that?
So what were they?
Through the chair, I actually don't have which 2 measures were achieved in front of me, but I could briefly go through the ones that weren't, if you'd prefer. Thank you. Result. The ones that were achieved would have been complaints and apologies. Is that one of the time to resolve ones? One of the resolution times?
Yeah. Sorry, this is about resolution times, but it gives the impression in the graph that it could be about water quality. I just make that point. That was my reading of it. You don't expect people to read all this. If you want to look at a graph and you say, "Whoa, we didn't meet our performance measures. Is our water bad?" or something like that.
Through the chair,
I'm not blaming you.
There was an issue with water quality, so we are reporting that we're non-compliant. Wellington Water is reporting that the water was non-compliant.
When was that?
Through the first half of last year. So it's what we would call a technical non-compliance.
Fluoride?
No. What it was a number of sensors effectively at the water treatment plant that weren't replaced within the time frame that they were supposed to be. When they were when they were replaced, it confirmed that the water they were reading correctly and the water was safe through that period, and that was during the old drinking water rules. We're reporting that we are compliant with the new rules as of. Yeah.
I understand. It's just if you look at the graphs, you think you don't relate those things, and perhaps we should think more about how we can do that. Just because it's not water quality. This is a technical thing in terms of, you didn't replace your sensor. Doesn't mean that the water quality was bad. So we just need to be really careful about the messages that we're sending people. That's all.
It's a really good point, I think, that Councillor Leggett raises, and I think we should be thinking that people will read this. Drinking water quality is an issue for many people. It's on the radar, and I think the point that you're pointing out, Councillor Leggett, would benefit from just a few words of explanation. In these summary reports, it's very tempting to have graphs and just minimise the words, but sometimes the messages then get convoluted, and you need to add a few words in to straighten the message out. So.
Yeah, that'd be for all the 3 waters.
Yeah. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, following on from those water quality measures, there's on page 172, the water quality tests around Porirua are not met. But surely 100% is an unachievable target because it relies on the weather being appropriate to go out there. We can't send people out to do the tests when the weather isn't clement, if you like. So when we set a 100% target, it just seems silly to me because it's just not achievable. And I wonder if we should bring down the target measure on that.
Through the chair, are you referring to the harbour measure?
Yeah,
Yes, correct.
Like they won't send people out when it's a stormy whatever day, and that just makes sense, doesn't it? So it's never going to be achievable, really. Yeah, but then you're always going to have non-achieved at the end of it. It just seems a silliness to me. I have others, though. Can I go on with other questions?
Please do.
Okay.
Please do, Councillor Duncan.
Page 111, the guarantees. Council's required to recognise the guarantee liability for LGFA at fair value, but being unable to determine a fair value, we've not recognised the liability. Is that okay? Is it? Like, we could do that with a lot of things.
I pass over to Sam on that because it's a sort of standard response that everyone gets. It is actually quite difficult to actually understand what that could be because from memory the guarantee it's the last line of defence. There's many other steps that would actually occur beforehand, and the likelihood of default is very low. So to get to that position, and I think that's been the wording that we've used previous years. So I'm going to.
Perhaps if I can start before handing over to Sam. One of the strong accounting precepts is that you need to be able to reliably measure. And so really what that's saying is that, there's no way to reliably measure what that liability is. So, you need to draw attention that there is a liability there, but, to put a figure in could be very misleading. So. That would be my understanding of what's happened here. Sam.
That's cool. Do you want to respond?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's a very high burden to have something unquantifiable, but we're satisfied it's met in this circumstance.
Great. A stormwater one. We were discussing earlier about the stormwater, that Felicity question there. I wonder, it says there were no reported habitable floors flooded. Does that include businesses as well, or is it just places where people live?
Through the chair, I believe it includes businesses as well, but I could endeavour to get back to you with that.
Well, I've had complaints from people in Wall Place saying that their factories are regularly flooded, and so this would probably not be accurate then.
I will come back to you with the definition. I don't have it on hand.
Thanks for that. Page 170. Just an interesting note there that the only people who are actually happy with our services are those in the cemetery. No, I'm finished, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. The mind boggles as to how they were surveyed. Councillor Trelin.
Silence is acceptance.
Yeah, cheers. Just a couple of questions going back to drinking water, actually. So I'm looking again at this table on 167. In particular, so an increase we've seen both in the percentage of real water loss from the system and also average consumption of drinking water per day per resident. My question is, when we see both of those going up, are they linked together? Can that increase in consumption of drinking water be explained by water being lost from the system, or do we have confidence that that actually reflects an increase in consumption?
Through the chair, the gross consumption per person per day includes leakage. So yes, they are tied together.
Okay, cool, fantastic. And I guess seeing both of those go up, I guess not doing the maths quickly in my head, but do we have any confidence around what the actual direction of travel is on usage? I guess if you exclude leakage?
Again, through the chair, there's a few things there, and that I can get back to you with more information if you like, but I think that we are seeing that usage is high in Wellington and remains high. It's not actually coming down per person, anecdotally up to maybe 50% more than a city like Auckland that's metered. But I could come back to you with more if you like.
Yeah, that'd be interesting because it's something that we do talk about a lot, and obviously we're focused on reducing the leakage, which is important. But
so I just remind you, John, we're talking about Porirua. Sorry, Chair.
Through the chair, we do have a presentation from Wellington Water on the 2nd of November, coming into summer, about water shortage restrictions, and so we'll cover it off then.
Okay, cool. Thank you. The other question was just in relation, just over the page onto 168, with the attendance for call-outs have increased a lot in the last year, except obviously for those identified under B there on the resolution of urgent call-outs. I wonder if you could just speak to that. Is that a resourcing issue, a staffing issue, and is there any active decision that we as a council could make about that, or is that just the state of the situation at the moment?
Through the chair, one of the things that Wellington Water has done this year is made significant improvements to how we look at those measures. Previously, we had included duplicate data in there, which, when you were looking at duplicates, say 5 people called about the same, about water being off to one property, 4 of those would be closed nearly instantly, and those would be recorded in the response times. So that was an error that we've fixed this year, and we've seen a significant increase in most response and resolution times as a result of that. That explains the majority of the variance.
Okay, cool. So fair to say that this is a technical difference as opposed to a dramatic shift in what we're delivering?
Through the chair again, yes, that would be fair. However, we do believe there is still an increase as jobs are increasing and the network is aging. So it's a little bit of both, but the primary difference from the reported result last year is in that change in the methodology.
Cool, thank you. And I guess it's interesting within that context, noting under B there, the fact that there actually has been a decrease, which is positive. Does that reflect a difference in priority in terms of where resources are going? Or I guess, how has that decrease occurred when everything else has gone up so much?
Through the chair, that one is a little bit of an anomaly. I don't have the answer for you on that. We would expect to see less variance, but it could just be a result of less of those errors or less of those duplicates being in that data set. It's to my knowledge, the only one that has improved, and it is a little bit strange, but we have full confidence in that one after identifying that and going through that with our auditors.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Philo.
Wondering about page 100 for point 14, investment in council-controlled organisations. With regards to the revenue, is that made up from, like, is that just for Porirua, or is that Wellington Water combined, or like what is that actual revenue made up of? Is it shares? Is it? Could someone give me some more context around that, please?
Good question. My understanding is that it's our 20% of Wellington Water's total revenue. So it's an accounting requirement that you disclose your share of the revenue and assets of that associated entity. Is that correct?
Is that a non-cash or a cash? Like, is that revenue that we are actually receiving? Non-cash?
Definitely non-cash.
Okay.
Definitely non-cash. It's a nice big number, isn't it? Yeah, that's the problem with accounting. There's quite a few things non-cash. Perhaps that's a really good segue into a point that I referred to earlier, just to draw the Audit and Risk Committee's attention. If you have a look on page 78 in the comprehensive revenue and expense, here's another non-cash item, and that's the fair value gain on the interest rate swaps. So really, in layman's terms, what that means is that both last year, where we had 6.4 million, and this year 10.6 million, that demonstrates the effectiveness of the hedging rate strategy. So, those instruments are marked to the current interest rates, and in the last 2 years we have gains, and that's we're talking cash. It's not cash in the bank, but it does show you that the interest rate, if we didn't have those instruments, would have been much higher. So that's a good point to look at.
I just have one more.
Please.
Page 97, other expenses. Contractors, the amount that's tagged to contractors, is that made up of Wellington Water, Downer, and Enviro Waste, or what is that made up of?
Through you, Chair, yes, that line does cover all our costs for Downers, Enviro Waste, etc., those major contractors.
Does that include Wellington Water too, or just those two?
Wouldn't? Wellington Water?
It doesn't, okay.
Yes.
All right, excellent discussion. Finance team, I think you've had a good. The members of the Audit and Risk Committee have been through your handiwork with a fine-tooth comb and some helpful comments there, hopefully. So if there's no further discussion, can I just remind you that on page 70 we've got quite a long list of recommendations. I won't go through those all again, but they have been moved and seconded. I think the key thing is that we as a committee endorsing the adoption of council. So when council consider this annual report on the 26th of October, the support of the Audit and Risk Committee can be confirmed. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour of that, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Excellent work. Thank you, team. Just stay at the table while we do the Ernst & Young report, just in case you can help with any questions there. So agenda item 7.9, the annual closing report from Ernst & Young, who are the agents for the Officer of the Auditor General to do the external audit. We've been asked to receive this report. I'm happy to move in that regard. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mayor. It's been moved and seconded. Sam, thank you for your efforts to get us to this point. Again, a challenging environment in which to undertake the audit in the local government sector in New Zealand. Thank you for your report. Take it as read and just highlight that before we open it up for discussion.
Great, thank you, Chair. And so I'll start on page 216 of the papers, which is the executive summary slide of our report. And so this calls out a few highlights, notes the 6 areas of audit focus that are pretty common for councils and consistent with our audit plan. In the top right, as we finalise this report for inclusion in the papers, we had 10 outstanding items. The key ones are called out in the body of the report, and I'll deal to them as I call out the highlights. And then on the audit differences, there was a late drafting error, so that number's different from the number at the back by about $90,000, so should read 235,000. But the takeaway is that quantum of impact of unadjusted differences on surplus and deficits are clearly not material to the financial statements as a whole. If I move over the page, infrastructure and other assets dominates the council's financial statements, both the most significant item on the balance sheet, but also the significant level of revaluation uplift in the current period. The slide sort of provides an overview of our work, but the key things are council has a number of assets or asset classes carried at valuation, and all of them were revalued in the current period, which is quite a task. Generally, these are run on an offset 2-year cycle, but between waters being refreshed due to cost pressures in the sector and being revalued 18 months ago, that's landed in the same annual period as a number of scheduled revaluations. The table at the bottom left just highlights the particular uplifts in that part. One key item to call out is approximately 50% of the valuation uplift is land. That's a very significant amount, but land is not depreciated. So when council thinks about rate funding depreciation, that uplift does not flow through into those considerations. And you principally use Aon for your valuations other than roading infrastructure. On the top right-hand side of that page, in the box, we just call out a couple of open items at mailing. So we've completed our Three Waters valuation work since mailing. No material changes to the numbers that you see in the papers today. Our working on roading additions carries on. That's principally working through with council the distinction between capital and operating spend with Downer, and has it ended up in the right place. We're working to conclude that as soon as we can. And we were testing the building cost assumptions in Aon's land and buildings valuation, and so we've recently concluded that again with no material change. Our work focuses on, for the valuations, principally assessing the competence and objectivity of the valuers that council employs, understanding the scope of their work. They're reliant on information received from council as to council's assets, their condition and performance. So we do test to that information, that the right information goes into the valuation, and then also how the value has gone and applied it. And we're interested in both the reasonableness of the material assumptions that might change the valuation outcomes and the reasonableness of the valuation overall. And then we put all the pieces together by going, if we're satisfied with the valuation, does it manifest in the financial statements that we audit correctly? If I turn over the page, we call out sort of a number of matters that have arisen in the valuations. It's been challenging, and we've had a number of versions as we worked through and corrected the errors. Roy referred earlier, Te Rapraha was the single most significant land and building valuation change, and as we sort of queried to understand that in our work, it turned the valuer to an error where they'd overlooked the reserve classification and the discount to land values, which should be reflected on that status, and so resulted in an about $5 million change being a reduction in the valuation that council booked. Roading relies on the RAM system that's subject of the internal audit discussed earlier on. There's very significant and detailed information of roading and roading related assets owned by the council. And so we've got some recommendations for management on how that information is controlled from some anomalies or differences from what we expected, comparing the data from 2 years ago to the data the valuer used. But ultimately it didn't change the valuation outcomes. And then in the Three Waters work, we had a number of challenges where, both clerical in nature, but also there was an asset that had a nil value that didn't make sense to us and some other things there. But these have largely been corrected by management where appropriate with assistance of the valuers. If I just turn over the page, rates is fundamental to the financial statements of the council, governed by legislation and regulation around the legality of the rate strike, so something that's a focus of our work. We completed our planned rates procedures without any issues, and so nothing to call out there. But on the right-hand side of the page, our work continues in respect of Waka Kotahi subsidy revenue recognised in the period. If I move to the next page, there's a new contingent liability disclosure. Council was a participant for a period of time in the risk pool vehicle, but had exited a number of years ago. This is an issue for the sector as a whole, where councils have participated, and so when you see your peer councils in the sector financial statements, a number of them will have a similar disclosure. You carry some residual risk for claims in the years in which you participated in a recent Supreme Court decision around the boundaries of what claims risk pool might pay. Just means some work will be undertaken to consider the possible financial impacts for council. So this is more likely than it's been in the past with that clarification, and a pretty significant piece of work done centrally at risk pool to get clarity on that. So it's just highlighting something may come of it and something may not, but we don't have enough information at this time to record a liability or conclude that a contingency isn't required. Non-financial performance information. So our role as auditor is to audit the performance information presented by the council in its annual report, and is it a faithful representation of performance? So we focus on a subset of measures we identify as significant, and both other individual measures reported accurately, but also reporting against the targets set in the long-term plan. Work's been completed successfully, so the performance story told in the financial statements is representative, consistent with the underlying work we've done. Council will recall, as we talked about in the conclusion of the 22 audit, and in our audit planning, we've carried forward a qualification related to the completeness of water complaints. So are all the complaints captured in a way that we can satisfy ourselves that the measure reported is a faithful representation? So again, Audit New Zealand have said at the Wellington water level, they don't have enough information to positively conclude in that regard. We've largely completed the planned work with Council around the information they capture. We have not yet concluded it. We're up to the stage where we're reconciling a greater number of complaints that Council's recorded versus what Wellington Water's used in the measure that Council's reported. So we're trying to, the next steps are understanding the reasons for differences and whether then that allows us to conclude that the information Council captured would be appropriate. If this is the case, the measures as reported in the draft would change, generally in an upward direction, and we may be able to remove the qualification. So we need to understand, are we all happy and in agreement that the data we think we've audited is an appropriate basis to recut the measure? We're hoping to complete that in the coming 2 weeks. If we don't, that qualification might exist depending on the complexity of the remaining work.
Sam, when you say we there, is that a joint effort between your team and management working with you to try and get this across the line?
Yeah, that's right, Warren. We need to marry up the data sets, but ultimately, if we believe the data that we've used is more correct, Council's reporting would have to change, and so obviously management has a role in that.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, go on. No, I just want to check what effect that qualification has on us. Does it have any real effect on us?
Sam, do you want to deal with that now?
So it probably leads nicely to the draft audit report in our pack, Councillor Duncan, but the audit report will say that the financial performance and position of the council is materially correct, so no qualification on the financial information, and explicitly describes for the water complaints measure only that we're unable to conclude positively in respect of those measures. So really carves out that piece and describes it separate relative to the total story. But reputationally, having a qualified audit report promotes questions and may be more challenging for council than the counterfactual.
But let's acknowledge it was there last year.
So Appendix B just highlights the number of outstanding matters we had. We continue to work away to get the sort of order of events from our perspective is land the last elements of financial and non-financial information, conclude whether any updates are required, some final QA checks on the documents, and planning to conclude that so it can go to council for the 26th of October, which is 2 weeks' time.
Thank you very much, Sam. And in that work to complete, you don't sense that, it's always never say never, but do you sense that there's not going to be any major issues that come out of that? It's just finalising some of these outstanding items.
Yeah, that's right. There may be some number changes, but the focus is on getting to the end of the work collaboratively with management.
Thank you. Roy.
Through you, Chair, just Sam didn't address the audit differences, which we've still to work through in his report, but it's in the report there, and we're happy to work through those. I just wanted to highlight that we're proposing to do a couple of other changes, and I did briefly mention this to Sam. I've gone through our asset register following I guess, a query into some costs, and concluded that we have a couple of assets in our software section which are not real assets. They were put in a number of years ago. They relate to when we moved from Dimension Data, which was a shared service combined with Wellington, the hut and everything, to the current Datacom provider. There was about 800,000 tied up that was capitalised, but in actual fact it's not it has been depreciated since, but it's not a real asset. So there's that, and also another piece of work which is called an Active Directory software. They're not actually real assets, so I'm proposing to actually write them off as we do there as adjustments to correct those. And also came across, following discussions with our librarian head, we have been depreciating our books over between a 5 to 10 year period. The reality is that books don't last much past 5 years, so all books that are over 5 years we're proposing to write down because it's incorrect. While I'm doing this adjustment, that's about 400,000, so there'll probably be a $800,000 to $900,000 additional adjustment to what EY have identified the changes that we'll put through. So those numbers will change slightly, but that's the reason for it. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Roy, for drawing that to our attention. For the eagle-eyed councillors, you will notice that difference in the numbers that you see in your pack for the 26th of October. So thank you, Roy. And both of those sound appropriate things to address at this point. Sam, and then Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, so just on the intangible assets, as a point of clarification, those assets are no longer in use by the council, so they were appropriate at the time, but weren't removed in a timely manner.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the mutual liability risk pool. So it's not quantifiable what our potential risk is there with that. Like, we have no idea about what it could be. It's an open-ended book, is it?
That's correct. So risk pool's written to council and said work's underway to quantify the matter, but it's not an insignificant exercise.
So we have a couple of those that we've discussed today. So, yep. Thank you, Roy. That I think would be very helpful.
So the risk pool situation was the court, I think it was Hawke's Bay? Napier. Took them to court. Risk pool, the issue was risk pool had declined a claim, and effectively the court determined that they were appropriate to decline a claim that related to, I guess, water damage, the leaky home situation, but they'd bundled up a whole lot of other costs associated with it. So in the claim, there was some costs that they felt they actually were appropriate and should be liable to pay. So that clarified the situation for that claim, and now risk pool therefore have got to go back and have a look at all those claims that they'd declined, which had a mixture in it. So, but to put it in perspective, we're a small shareholder of in risk pool, and we pulled out in 2015. So the claims have to be in that period for us to be liable. So it's a number of years ago, and then if there is a liability, that will be spread across all shareholders. So again, it will be a dilution. So while it is a contingent or possibility at this stage, and we don't know the number, I believe it's unlikely to be, if there is something, a large amount.
Thank you, Roy. That's most helpful. All right, so we've been asked to receive the report from EY. It's been moved and seconded. So all those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. We have no further business, but I'd just like to seek some advice. What I'm planning on doing now is let's close the meeting, and then the non-management team just stay on with Sam, because for audit and risk committees, it's really good process at this time of the year that we have a small amount of time with the external auditors without management present. And it just gives the non-management team the opportunity to ask any questions of the auditor, or for the auditor to tell us anything that they wish to. So is it in order that I close the meeting now? We thank management, and then the rest of us will just stay on and have a short amount of time with Sam. All right, so that being the case, can I close the meeting by thanking you all again. Excellent discussion today. Really good sort of feedback for the team. I hope that you get some benefit out of this discussion. One of the real key benefits of an audit risk committee is that we can spend a little bit of time and drill down on some of these issues, particularly in the annual report. So it prevents a lot of extra time, or one would hope it would prevent a lot of extra time at council when the annual report goes up. But again, I think a great effort by all those involved, and I wish to acknowledge that again. And thank you all. So let's close the meeting by again asking Councillor Filo and us all repeating the karakia to close the meeting. Thank you.